The house on Maple Street had been Agnes's sanctuary for 42 years. It was a modest brick colonial with a sagging porch and a maple tree that had long since stopped producing the brilliant red leaves she remembered from her youth. But it was hers, or at least it had been until Harold passed 3 years ago. And the children began treating it like a storage unit for their own ambitions that Agnes moved through the kitchen with the careful economy of a woman who had learned to make herself small. She wiped the same spot on the counter twice, though it was already clean, her fingers tracing the familiar grain of the laminate. The coffee pot gurgled its last few drops, and she poured herself a half-cup, the bitterness settling against her tongue the way disappointment had settled against her heart over the years. At 72, Agnes had perfected the art of invisibility. She wore beige cardigans and sensible shoes. She spoke in soft tones that sometimes went unheard. She nodded along when her daughter Linda explained, in that brisk, managerial tone she had adopted since becoming a regional sales director, why Agnes should sell the house and move into the Garden View retirement community. "It's what's best, Mom," Linda would say, not asking, just telling. "You're not getting any younger. And the stairs are a hazard. Besides, you'd have company your own age." Company. Agnes had tried to explain that she didn't want company her own age. She wanted Harold back. She wanted the weight of his arm across her shoulders during the evening news. She wanted the sound of his laugh, that rolling, unself-conscious sound that had made her fall in love with him in the first place. But Linda didn't want to hear about what Agnes wanted. Linda wanted solutions. Linda wanted closure. Linda wanted the house listed by spring so she could use her share of the proceeds to upgrade to a house in the better school district for her own children. Agnes walked to the small pantry off the kitchen, the one with the door that stuck if you didn't lift it just right. The children never came in here. They thought it was just for canned goods and the ancient set of china Agnes's mother had given her, the one with the tiny pink roses that had faded to ghosts of their former selves. They had no idea that beneath the loose floorboard, next to the bag of flour that had been there since before Harold got sick, there was a thick manila envelope that it held $4,200. $2,000 of it was from Harold's life insurance, the money he had told her to hide, just in case. "Put it where you can get to it," he had said, his voice already thin and reedy from the cancer that was eating him from the inside. "Keep it secret. Keep it safe. The kids are good kids, but money makes people strange, Aggie. I've seen it happen." The rest she had saved herself, dollar by dollar, clipping coupons, mending clothes instead of buying new ones, skipping the afternoon coffee at the cafe she used to love. For 3 years, she had added to it, sacrificing little pieces of herself for a dream she had not yet spoken aloud. France. She had never been. When she and Harold were young, they had promised each other they would go when they retired. They would walk along the Seine, eat croissants in tiny cafes, stand at the top of the Eiffel Tower and feel like they were on top of the world. But life had gotten in the way, as life always does. The children needed college tuitions, then cars, then down payments on houses. There was always a reason to postpone. And then Harold got sick, and the dream became a photograph pinned to the corkboard in her sewing room, faded and curling at the edges. She had been planning this trip for 18 months now. Her friend Margaret, whose husband had passed 2 years before Harold, had gone to France with a group of widows and come back with stories that made Agnes's heart ache. "You should have seen the lavender fields, Aggie," Margaret had said, her eyes still bright with the memory. "And the people were so kind. They didn't treat me like I was old. They treated me like I was interesting." Interesting. Agnes couldn't remember the last time she felt interesting. The plan was simple. In 3 weeks, she would tell Linda and her son Robert that she was going to visit Margaret in Florida for a week. She had even asked Margaret to back her up, and Margaret, bless her practical heart, had agreed. Agnes would take the envelope from its hiding place, walk to the bank and exchange the cash for traveler's checks, and then take the Amtrak to New York, where her flight would depart from JFK. She had the itinerary memorized: 2 weeks in Paris, then a train to the south of France, where she would spend another week in a village Margaret had recommended, one with narrow cobblestone streets and a bakery that made the best croissants Margaret had ever tasted. She had been so careful, so meticulous. She had not told a soul except Margaret, and Margaret was a vault. She had not written anything down, not even in her private journal, which she kept tucked beneath her mattress. She had counted the money 3 times, stacked the bills neatly, and placed the envelope back in its hiding spot every evening before she went to bed. It was her secret, her talisman, her promise to herself that she was still a person capable of wanting things. That is why, when Agnes arrived home from her weekly visit to the grocery store on that Tuesday afternoon in late September, she felt the cold grip of horror settle around her throat. The house was too quiet. Something was wrong. She could feel it in the way the air seemed to vibrate, in the subtle rearrangements that a stranger's presence leaves behind like fingerprints. She put her reusable shopping bags on the kitchen counter. The grocery store logo faded from years of use. The refrigerator hummed its steady, mechanical hum. A squirrel chittered in the maple tree outside. Everything looked the same. And yet, Agnes knew as she walked to the pantry. The door stuck, as it always did, and she lifted it with the practiced motion of 42 years. Inside, everything was in its place. The cans of soup. The boxes of pasta. The flour that no one would ever use. But the floorboard was not quite flush. A sliver of light showed along the edge, a hairline fracture in her careful universe. Agnes knelt down, her knees cracking in protest. It took her a moment to work the board loose, her fingers trembling so badly she had to stop and take a deep breath. When she finally lifted it, the space beneath was empty. No manila envelope. No $4,200. Just the dusty remnants of flour, and the faint outline of where the envelope had rested for 3 years. As she pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the rapid flutter of her heart. No, she thought. No, no, no. This cannot be happening. The money was the centerpiece of her dream. Without it, she was just an old woman in a beige cardigan, living in a house that no longer felt like hers, surrounded by the ghosts of a future that would never arrive. Her mind raced backward, trying to reconstruct the hours since she had left the house that morning. She had gone to the grocery store at 9, as she did every Tuesday. She had been gone for 2 hours, maybe 2.5, because she had stopped to chat with Mrs. Henderson, who had just had a new hip and was very proud of her recovery. The front door had been locked. She was sure of it. She had checked it twice, as she always did, because old habits die hard and Harold had been very particular about locks. But Linda had a key. And Robert had a key. And Linda's husband, Paul, had a key, because he had helped her fix the gutter last spring, and she had never asked for it back. The children came and went as they pleased, always with good intentions, always with an excuse. Just checking on you, Mom. Making sure you've got enough food. We were in the neighborhood. Agnes had never minded before. She had welcomed the visits, despite the way they made her feel small and needy. Now, she realized with a clarity that felt like a slap, she had been too trusting, too invisible, too easy to overlook. She pulled out her phone, the cheap flip phone Linda had given her 2 years ago because smartphones are too complicated for you, Mom. With shaking hands, she called Linda's number. It went straight to voicemail. Of course it did. Linda was always too busy for phone calls, though she could text with the speed and efficiency of a much younger woman. Linda, it's your mother, Agnes said, her voice trembling despite her efforts to control it. I need to ask you something. It's important. Please call me back as soon as you get this. She waited an hour, then 2, then 3. She sat in her armchair, the one that had been Harold's, and stared out the window at the street that had once been full of children on bicycles and now seemed perpetually empty. She thought about calling Robert, but Robert was in Chicago for a business conference, and she didn't have the number for the hotel where he was staying. She thought about calling the police, but what would she say? My savings are missing. I don't have proof. I don't know who took them. They would think she was a confused old woman. Another case of misplaced memories and cognitive decline. And then at 6:30, when the light outside had begun to turn golden and the shadows on the wall had lengthened into long skeletal fingers, her phone buzzed. It was Linda. Mom, sorry I missed your call. I was in meetings all afternoon. What's up? Agnes gripped the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. Linda, I need to ask you something. Did you come by the house today? There was a pause. A long one. The kind of pause that felt like a universe collapsing in on itself. I came by this morning to pick up the sewing machine you said I could borrow. You weren't here, but I let myself in. I hope that's okay. Paul needed it for a project, and you said I could use it any time. The sewing machine. The old singer that had been in the family for 3 generations. Agnes had indeed said Linda could borrow it, though she hadn't expected her to take it so soon. Linda, I also had an envelope in the pantry. Under the floorboard. It had my savings in it. $4,200. It's gone. Another pause. This time when Linda spoke, her voice was careful. Measured. The voice she used when she was trying to calm down a difficult client. Mom, what are you talking about? Why would you hide money under the floorboard? That's not safe. That's not something you should be doing. Linda, please. Did you take it? I saw an envelope, Linda admitted, and Agnes's heart plummeted into her stomach. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was just old papers or something. There was a lot of stuff in that pantry. I was cleaning it out a little, trying to help you organize. I put the envelope on the kitchen table and forgot about it. Then Paul came by to pick up the sewing machine, and he must have grabbed it by mistake. He's been dealing with a lot of paperwork for his mother's birthday party. You know how Paul is. He gets distracted. Agnes felt the world tilting beneath her feet. Paul. Of course. Paul was always in a hurry, always grabbing things without looking. And he was planning a birthday party for his mother, Dolores, the woman who had been the center of attention for the entire family, for as long as Agnes could remember. Dolores, who had everything and wanted more. Dolores, who Agnes had never quite been able to like, despite all her efforts. Linda, that money was for a trip, Agnes said, her voice cracking. I've been saving for 3 years. It was for France. I was going to go to France. France, Linda's voice sharpened with disbelief. Mom, you can't go to France. You can barely walk to the mailbox. It's completely unreasonable. And besides, you should have told me about the money. We could have put it in a bank, where it would be safe. You shouldn't have kept cash in the house like that. It was practically asking to be stolen. Stolen. The word hung in the air between them, ugly and accusatory. Agnes wanted to scream. She wanted to tell Linda that she had been saving for this trip for years, that it was the only thing that had kept her going through the long, empty days, through the holidays when Linda and Robert made plans with their own families and forgot to include her, through the anniversaries when she sat alone and talked to Harold's photograph. She wanted to tell Linda that she had been so careful, so cautious, and that the money hadn't been stolen at all. It had been taken by the same daughter who was always just trying to help. Instead, Agnes took a breath and said, Linda, you need to get that money back. I don't care what Paul did with it. He needs to return it. Tonight. Mom, it's too late for that. The party is tomorrow. Paul already bought the gifts. He got Dolores a designer handbag and a weekend spa package. He spent almost all of it. He thought it was my money. He thought I was helping him out. Linda's voice was defensive, the same tone she had used when she was 16 and Agnes had caught her sneaking out past curfew. Agnes closed her eyes. The darkness behind her eyelids was more comforting than the dim light of the living room. She felt the weight of her years pressing down on her shoulders, heavy and unyielding. I need that money, Linda, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It was my savings. My dream. You had no right to take it. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Linda spoke again, her voice was softer, but no less firm. Mom, I'm sorry. I really am. But it's done now. The money is gone. I can't get it back. But I promise we'll make it up to you. You can stay with us for a few weeks. The kids would love to have you. And maybe next year, when things are less tight, we can all take a family vacation somewhere close. The beach maybe. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Agnes said nothing. She was too tired, too broken, too furious to form the words. She had spent her entire life sacrificing for these children. She had given them everything, her time, her energy, the last of her youth. And what had it gotten her? A half cup of bitter coffee and a daughter who thought a weekend at a crowded beach could replace a dream she had held on to for nearly 50 years. Linda, Agnes said finally, I need you to leave me alone tonight. I need to think. Are you sure, Mom? I could come over. We could talk about it. Maybe have some tea. No, Agnes said. I need to be alone. She ended the call and placed the phone on the table beside Harold's chair. Then very slowly, she got up and walked into her sewing room. The photograph of the Eiffel Tower was still on the corkboard, faded and curling at the edges. She looked at it for a long, long time, tracing the outline of the tower with her finger as the tears began to slide silently down her cheeks. What was she supposed to do now the money was gone? Spent on a gift for a woman who didn't need anything, for a woman who would never appreciate it, for a woman who had already taken so much from Agnes without even knowing it. Dolores had been the life of every party, the center of every family gathering, the grandmother who got all the credit while Agnes did all the work. She had taken Harold's attention in the final years of his life too, calling him every day to complain about her minor ailments, demanding his sympathy when he needed all his strength just to breathe. And now this. Another theft. Another proof that Agnes's life was not her own, that her dreams were not her own, that even the money she had saved so carefully for a future she had been too afraid to embrace could be snatched away by the very people who claimed to love her. But as the tears dried on her cheeks, something shifted in Agnes's chest. It was a small thing, barely perceptible, like the first tremor of an earthquake deep beneath the surface of the earth. It was the beginning of anger. Not the loud, explosive anger she had seen in her husband and her children. That was something she had never been capable of. No, this was quieter, colder, more dangerous. It was the anger of a woman who had been dismissed and undervalued for far too long. The anger of a person who had finally realized that being invisible didn't mean she had to be powerless. She walked back to the pantry and knelt down once more. She ran her fingers over the empty space beneath the floorboard, tracing the outline of where the envelope had been. And then she noticed something she had missed before. A small piece of paper, crumpled and nearly invisible, had been caught in the crack between the floorboard and the subfloor. She pulled it out carefully, smoothing it flat on her palm. That it was a receipt. From a boutique downtown. For a designer handbag. The total was $3,800. And the name on the receipt was Paul's. Agnes stared at the receipt for a long moment, her mind spinning. Paul had spent nearly all of her savings on a single handbag. For Dolores. A woman who already had a closet full of designer handbags, who had never worked a day in her life, who had everything handed to her on a silver platter, while Agnes had scraped and saved for 3 years just to afford a dream. That the anger in her chest flared brighter, hotter. But it was not the blind, consuming anger that would have made her scream or cry or lash out. It was something sharper, something more precise. It was the anger of a woman who had just found the weapon she needed. Agnes folded the receipt carefully and tucked it into her pocket. Then she stood up, brushed the dust from her knees and walked back to the living room. She sat down in Harold's chair, the one that still smelled faintly of his aftershave, and she began to think that she had no money. She had no power. She had no leverage. But she had the truth. And the truth, she realized, was a more dangerous weapon than she had ever imagined. Tomorrow, she would go to the party. She would stand in front of Dolores and Paul and Linda and all the guests, and she would tell them exactly what had happened. She would show them the receipt. She would explain that her daughter and son-in-law had stolen from her, had taken the money she had saved for a trip to France and spent it on a gift for a woman who already had everything. And if that didn't work, if they still refused to return her money, she would find another way. She would go to the newspapers. She would go to the television stations. She would shout her story from the rooftops if she had to. She was done being silent. She was done being invisible. She was done being the woman who accepted a payment plan and a pat on the head and a promise that someday, maybe, things would be different. No, Agnes thought, her fingers curling around the receipt in her pocket. Things were going to be different starting now. She stood up and walked to the mirror in the hallway, the one with the ornate silver frame that had belonged to her grandmother. She looked at her reflection, really looked, and for the first time in years, she liked what she saw. A woman with silver hair and tired eyes, but also with a fire burning deep inside her. A woman who had been pushed too far, who had given too much, who had been taken for granted one too many times. Tomorrow, Dolores, she murmured to herself, a small, cold smile curving her lips. Tomorrow, we're going to have a conversation you won't forget. She went back to the sewing room and pulled the photograph of the Eiffel Tower off the corkboard. She pressed it to her chest, feeling the crinkle of the paper against her blouse. I'm coming, Harold, she whispered. I don't know how yet, but I'm coming. And I'm not letting anyone stop me. Not Linda. Not Paul. Not Dolores. Not anyone. That night, Agnes slept more soundly than she had in months. She dreamed of France, of lavender fields and cobblestone streets, and the scent of fresh croissants drifting through the air. And when she woke the next morning, she felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. She felt hope. And she felt ready. The morning of Dolores's party dawned bright and clear, the kind of late September day that fooled you into thinking summer might linger forever. Agnes stood at her bedroom window, watching the sunlight filter through the maple tree, and she felt a strange calm settle over her. She had not slept much, but what sleep she had gotten was deep and dreamless, unbroken by the familiar anxieties that had haunted her nights for years. She dressed with care, choosing a navy blue dress she had not worn since Harold's funeral. It was somber perhaps, but it gave her a sense of purpose, a reminder that she was attending an event that carried weight. She pinned her silver hair into a low bun, applied a touch of lipstick, and slipped the receipt from the boutique into her clutch purse. She also tucked in a small notebook and a pen, because Agnes had learned long ago that having the facts written down gave her confidence when her voice might otherwise falter. The country club was only a 15-minute drive from her house, but Agnes took the bus anyway. She needed the time to compose herself, to rehearse the words she would say. The bus was nearly empty, just a few early morning shoppers and a teenager with headphones, and Agnes sat in the back, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her mind running through the conversation ahead. That she thought about all the years she had swallowed her pride. She thought about the time Linda had borrowed $2,000 for a down payment on a new car and had never paid it back, even though Agnes had mentioned it twice, softly, apologetically. She thought about the Christmas when Robert had brought his new wife to dinner, and his wife had spent the entire meal complaining about the food, while Agnes had spent 3 days preparing it. She thought about the birthdays she had hosted, the school plays she had attended, the sleepless nights she had spent worrying about children who had grown up to treat her as an afterthought. And she thought about Dolores, the woman who had everything, who had never had to scrape and save, who had never known what it felt like to have a dream and watch it slip through her fingers. Dolores, who had called Harold in the hospital to complain about her sciatica while he was struggling to breathe. Dolores, who had monopolized every family gathering with her endless stories about her travels, her achievements, her perfect life. Dolores, who had never once asked Agnes how she was doing, never once offered a kind word or a helping hand. Agnes had endured it all with quiet grace. She had smiled through the insults, swallowed the resentment, told herself that she was being a good Christian, a good mother, a good wife. She had believed that her patience would be rewarded, that her children would eventually recognize her sacrifices and appreciate her for them. But patience, she had finally realized, was just another word for submission. And she was done submitting. The bus pulled up to the country club entrance, and Agnes stepped off into the warm morning air. The building loomed before her, all white columns and manicured hedges, and for a moment she felt a flicker of doubt. What was she doing here? She was just an old woman, alone and powerless. What could she possibly accomplish by making a scene at her daughter's mother-in-law's birthday party? But then she remembered the empty space beneath the floorboard. She remembered the sound of her own voice on the phone, begging Linda to help her. She remembered the 3 years of coupons and mended clothes and skipped coffee dates. And the doubt evaporated, replaced by a cold, steady determination. She walked through the front doors and into the ballroom, where the party was already in full swing. The room was a vision of gold and cream, with enormous floral arrangements on every table, and a live band playing soft jazz in the corner. The guests were dressed in their finest, glasses of champagne in hand, laughter and chatter filling the air. Agnes spotted Linda first. Her daughter was standing near the bar, talking to a group of women Agnes recognized as Dolores's friends from the garden club. Linda was wearing a pale pink dress that made her look younger, softer, and she was laughing at something one of the women had just said. She looked happy. She looked carefree. She looked like a woman who had no idea that her mother had spent the previous night crying into her pillow. Then Agnes saw Paul. He was across the room, hovering near Dolores, who was holding court at the front of the ballroom. Dolores was wearing a stunning pink silk dress that Agnes knew, with a certainty that made her stomach clench, had cost a significant portion of her savings. She was surrounded by admirers, all of them hanging on her every word. A designer handbag, the one from the receipt, was draped over her arm like a trophy. Agnes took a deep breath and began to walk. She moved slowly, deliberately, her heels clicking on the marble floor. She did not look at Linda or Paul or Dolores. She kept her eyes fixed on the front of the room, on the stage where the band was playing, and she let the determination in her chest guide her forward. She was halfway across the room when Linda spotted her. Her daughter's face flickered through a rapid succession of emotions: surprise, alarm, and finally a forced smile. She excused herself from the garden club women and hurried over, her heels clicking a frantic rhythm. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Linda's voice was low, urgent, the voice of a woman who was trying to avert a disaster. "I didn't think you were coming." "I wasn't," Agnes said. "But I changed my mind." Linda's eyes narrowed. She knew something was wrong. She had probably been dreading this since the moment Agnes had walked out of her house the day before. "Mom, please don't make a scene. This is a special day for Dolores. Can we talk about this later in private?" "No," Agnes said. "We're going to talk about it now." She moved past Linda before her daughter could stop her, walking toward the front of the room where Dolores was holding court. She could feel the eyes of the other guests on her, curious and slightly alarmed. Agnes was not the kind of woman who walked into a room with purpose. She was the kind of woman who slipped in quietly and found a seat in the back. Dolores noticed her approach and broke off mid-sentence, her perfectly painted lips forming a surprised O. "Agnes, what a lovely surprise. I didn't think you'd come. Linda said you were feeling under the weather." "Linda was mistaken," Agnes said, her voice ringing out in the sudden silence. "I'm feeling fine. Better than fine, actually. I'm feeling quite well." She turned to face the room, and the chatter around her began to die down. She could see Linda and Paul exchanging panicked glances near the bar. She could see Robert standing by the doorway, his expression a mixture of confusion and alarm. But she didn't let them deter her. "I want everyone to know something," Agnes said, her voice steady and clear. "I want everyone to know that the handbag Dolores is wearing, the one she's been showing off all night, was paid for with my savings. $4,200 that I had been saving for 3 years to take a trip to France. A trip I had dreamed about my entire married life. A trip that my husband and I planned to take together before he died." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Dolores's face went white beneath her carefully applied makeup. "Agnes, what are you talking about? I don't understand." "My daughter Linda took the money from my house," Agnes continued, her voice unwavering. "She took it without my permission. And she gave it to Paul, who used it to buy gifts for this party. For your birthday, Dolores. And I want it back. I want every penny back." Linda pushed through the crowd, her face flushed with anger. "Mom, stop it right now. You're embarrassing yourself. And you're embarrassing us. This is not the time or place." "This is exactly the time and the place," Agnes said, turning to face her daughter. "You've been taking advantage of me for years, Linda. You and Paul and Robert. You all think I'm just an old woman who doesn't matter. You think I'll just go along with whatever you want because I'm too weak to fight back. Well, you're wrong. I'm done being invisible. I'm done being the person you use and discard. I want my money back, and I want it back now." The room was completely silent. Even the band had stopped playing. Everyone was staring at Agnes, but she didn't feel embarrassed. She felt powerful. For the first time in years, she felt like she was the one in control. Paul stepped forward, his face pale and sweaty. "Agnes, I told you we can set up a payment plan. We can work this out. There's no need to make a public spectacle." "Every dollar," Agnes repeated, her voice cutting through his excuses like a blade. "I don't want a payment plan. I don't want your empty promises. I want my money, and I'm not leaving this room until I get it." Dolores finally found her voice, and it was shrill with outrage. "How dare you come here and ruin my party with this nonsense? Linda, control your mother. This is utterly humiliating." Linda's face was a mask of fury and embarrassment. "Mom, I'm begging you. Please. Let's go somewhere private and talk about this. I'll make it right. I promise." "Then make it right now," Agnes said. "Write me a check. Or go to the bank and withdraw the cash. But do it in front of everyone, so they can see that you're a woman of your word." Linda's hands were trembling. "I can't do that, Mom. I don't have that kind of money right now. I told you we spent it on the party. We can't get it back." Agnes reached into her clutch purse and pulled out the receipt. She held it up for everyone to see. Then return the handbag. Return the spa package. Return whatever you can. Because that money was mine, and I will not let you steal my dream. Dolores snatched the receipt from Agnes's hand, her eyes scanning it quickly. Her face went from white to red. This was for me. You bought this with stolen money. She turned to Paul, her voice shaking with anger. You told me you bought this with your bonus. You lied to me. Paul opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked like a man who had just been caught in a trap of his own, making that. Linda stepped between them, her voice rising. This is not about the handbag. This is about my mother making a scene and embarrassing everyone. Mom, I am asking you one last time. Please leave. Agnes looked at her daughter, really looked, and she felt a pang of sadness. This was the little girl she had rocked to sleep, the teenager she had helped with her homework, the young woman she had walked down the aisle. Somewhere along the way, that girl had become a stranger, a woman who cared more about appearances than about her own mother's happiness. No, Agnes said softly. I won't leave. Not until I have what's mine. The silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. Agnes could feel the eyes of the guests on her, could hear the whispered murmurs spreading through the crowd. But she did not waver. She stood her ground, her back straight, her chin lifted, and she waited. Finally, Dolores spoke. Her voice was cold, controlled, and utterly devoid of warmth. This party is ruined. I want everyone to leave. Right now. I will not be humiliated like this in front of my friends. The guests began to disperse, some of them casting sympathetic glances at Agnes, others whispering behind their hands. Linda stood frozen, her face a mask of fury and shame. Paul was already retreating toward the exit. His shoulders hunched as Agnes watched them go, and when the room was nearly empty, she walked up to Linda and placed a hand on her daughter's arm. I'm sorry it had to come to this, she said quietly. But I meant every word. I want my money back, Linda. And I will not stop until I get it. Linda pulled away, her eyes glistening with tears of anger. You've ruined everything, Mom. Everything. Dolores will never forgive me. Paul will never forgive me. You've destroyed our family. No, Agnes said, her voice firm. You destroyed our family the day you took that money. I'm just the one who's finally willing to say it out loud. She turned and walked out of the ballroom, her heels clicking on the marble floor. She did not look back. She did not need to. She had said what she needed to say, and she had planted the seeds of something that could not be undone. The bus ride home was quiet, the streets passing by in a blur of autumn colors. Agnes sat in the back, her hands folded in her lap, and she allowed herself a small, quiet smile. She had done it. She had confronted her daughter, her son-in-law, the woman who had taken everything from her. She had told the truth, and the truth had set her freed. But she knew this was not the end. Linda would not give up that easily. Paul would find ways to avoid repayment. Dolores would spread her venom through the family, turning everyone against Agnes. There would be consequences, and they would be swift and harsh. Agnes was ready for them. She had spent 72 years being invisible. Now she would spend the rest of her life being unforgettable. That when she got home, she walked to the pantry and knelt down in front of the loose floorboard. She placed her hand on the empty space and made a silent promise. I'm coming for you, France. I don't know how yet, but I will find a way. And when I do, I'm never coming back. She stood up, brushed the dust from her knees, and walked into the living room. She had a phone call to make, a lawyer to hire, a new plan to put into motion. And this time, she would not let anyone stop her. The days following the party were eerily quiet. Agnes had expected fireworks, angry phone calls, maybe even a surprise visit from Linda or Robert demanding an apology. Instead, there was nothing. No calls, no texts, no knocks at the door. The silence was its own kind of violence, a punishment designed to make her feel isolated and alone. Agnes did not break. She went about her daily routines with a calm that surprised even herself. She walked to the grocery store. She watered the small garden in her backyard. She sat in her armchair and read the novels Margaret had lent her. She did not reach out to Linda, though every instinct screamed at her to mend the rift. She had done enough mending. It was time for someone else to do the work. On the third morning, she got a call from Robert. His voice was measured, the voice he used in boardroom negotiations, and Agnes felt her guard go up immediately. "Mum, we need to talk," he said. "I've been hearing some things from Linda. Some things about a scene you made at Dolores's party. She's very upset." "She's upset," Agnes repeated, her voice flat. "That's interesting. I'm upset too, Robert. I'm upset that my daughter stole my savings. I'm upset that my son-in-law spent it on a handbag for a woman who doesn't need anything. I'm upset that no one seems to care except me." Robert sighed. A long, weary sound that made Agnes want to reach through the phone and shake him. "Mom, I understand you're frustrated. But you have to see it from our perspective. You've been acting erratically. Hiding money under the floorboard, making a public scene at a party that's not like you. Linda is worried about your mental health. We all are." Agnes felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. "My mental health. I see. So now I'm crazy because I won't let my children steal from me." "No one is saying you're crazy, Mom. But you have to admit, the way you've been handling this is not normal. Linda is trying to help you. We all are. We just want what's best for you." "What's best for me?" Agnes repeated, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Robert, do you know what I did for your wedding? I sold my mother's jewelry, the only thing she left me, to help you pay for the venue. Do you know what I did when Linda needed a new roof on her house? I gave her $12,000 from Harold's pension, money he would have wanted me to use for myself. I have spent my entire life giving, and I have nothing left to give. So when I say I want my money back, I mean it. And I will not be gaslit into thinking I'm the problem." There was a long pause on Robert's end. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "Mom, I didn't know about the jewelry. Or the pension. Linda never told me." "Of course she didn't," Agnes said bitterly. "She never tells anyone when she takes something. She just takes it, and she expects me to keep quiet. Well, I'm not keeping quiet anymore." Robert cleared his throat. "Look, I don't want to fight with you. I'm coming to visit this weekend. We can talk about this face to face, figure out a solution. Just don't do anything rash before then, okay?" Agnes agreed to the visit, though she suspected Robert was not coming to help her. He was coming to soothe his own conscience, to convince himself that he had done his duty as a son. She did not argue. She just let him make his plans and hung up the phone. That afternoon, she walked to the small legal clinic downtown. The lawyer she had spoken to over the phone, a sharp-eyed woman named Miriam who specialized in elder law, had agreed to meet with her free of charge for an initial consultation. Agnes had been nervous about the meeting, worried that she would be patronized or dismissed, but Miriam had been brisk and businesslike, the kind of woman who got things done. "Mrs. Calloway," Miriam said, gesturing for Agnes to sit down. "I reviewed the situation you described over the phone. It sounds like a clear case of conversion. That's the legal term for using someone else's property in a way that's inconsistent with their rights. But there are complications." Agnes sat forward. "What kind of complications?" "The main issue is proof. Do you have any documentation of the savings bank statements, evidence that the money was yours and intended for a specific purpose?" Agnes thought back to the 3 years of careful saving. "I have bank statements showing withdrawals. Small amounts mostly. $5 here, $10 there. I didn't keep a running tally because I was worried someone might find it." She pulled a small folder from her purse. "I also have the receipt from the boutique. The one Paul used to buy the handbag. It shows the purchase price, the date, and the item." Miriam examined the receipt, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "This is helpful. It ties the money to a specific transaction. And you say your daughter admitted over the phone that she took the envelope?" "Yes. She said she thought it was old papers. And she said Paul grabbed it by mistake." "That could be a problem," Miriam admitted. "If they can convince a judge that the taking was unintentional, it becomes a civil matter rather than a criminal one. But the fact that they spent the money on non-essential items, gifts for a birthday party, works in your favor. It suggests they knew what they were doing." Agnes nodded slowly. "What are my options?" "You can sue for the return of the money plus damages. The process will take time, months, maybe longer. And it will strain your relationship with your daughter and son-in-law even further. Are you prepared for that?" "I'm prepared for anything," Agnes said. "I've been pushed around my entire life. I'm done with that." Miriam studied her for a long moment. All right. I'll send your daughter and son-in-law a formal demand letter. It will state that you are seeking the return of the full amount within 10 business days, or you will file a lawsuit. It's a standard first step, but it often works. People don't like the idea of going to court. Agnes agreed to the plan. She left the legal clinic feeling lighter than she had in weeks, a sense of purpose propelling her forward. She was no longer a passive victim of her family's greed. She was a woman with a lawyer and a plan. That evening, she received a text from Linda. It was short and cold. I heard you hired a lawyer. This is ridiculous, Mom. You're going to destroy this family over $4,200. Think about what you're doing to the kids. They're going to hear about this. They're going to be ashamed of you. Agnes read the text 3 times, her thumb hovering over the reply button. She wanted to lash out, to remind Linda that the kids would be ashamed of their mother, not their grandmother. But she held back. She had learned that silence was sometimes more powerful than words. That she typed a single response. Return the money. Then we can talk about the family. Linda's response was immediate. You'll regret this, Mom. You have no idea what you're starting. Agnes put her phone down and walked into the kitchen. She poured herself a glass of water and stood at the window, watching the last light of the sun disappear behind the trees. She felt a strange sense of peace, a calm that came from knowing she was finally standing up for herself. She was no longer the woman who would accept a payment plan and a pat on the head. She was the woman who would fight for what was hers. The next day, Linda arrived at the house unannounced. She walked through the front door with her own key, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Agnes was in the living room reading, and she looked up as her daughter strode in like she owned the place. Mom, we need to talk, Linda said, her voice clipped and businesslike. We do, Agnes agreed, closing her book. But you don't get to barge into my house like this. You take off your shoes and you sit down and you talk to me like a human being. Linda blinked, visibly taken aback. She was not used to Agnes giving orders, but she complied, slipping off her heels and sitting down on the sofa across from Agnes. I got the letter from your lawyer, Linda said. It's ridiculous, Mom. You're suing your own daughter over a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding, Agnes said calmly. You took my money. You gave it to Paul. He spent it on gifts for Dolores. That's not a misunderstanding. That's theft. Linda's face flushed. I didn't steal it. I found an envelope in your pantry and thought it was old papers. I put it on the kitchen table. Paul grabbed it by accident. He didn't mean to take it. Then why didn't you return it? Agnes asked. Why didn't you call me the moment you realized what had happened? Because I didn't realize what had happened until it was too late. Linda's voice was rising. By the time I found out, the money was already spent. What was I supposed to do? Demand that Paul return the gifts? Embarrass him in front of his mother? You could have called me, Agnes repeated. You could have apologized. You could have made a plan to pay me back. Instead, you told me to calm down and let things work themselves out. You treated me like I was being unreasonable. Linda's eyes glistened with tears of frustration. What do you want from me? Mom, do you want me to grovel? Do you want me to beg for forgiveness? Because I won't do that. I'm not the one who made a scene at a family party. I'm not the one who's dragging my own child to court over a few $1,000s. Agnes sat back in her chair, studying her daughter's face. Linda was so caught up in her own anger, her own sense of injustice, that she couldn't see the truth. She had been the one to take the money. She had been the one to make the mistake. And now she was blaming her mother for not letting it slide. I don't want you to grovel, Agnes said quietly. I just want my money back. I want you to take responsibility for what you did. And I want you to stop treating me like I'm a burden. Linda opened her mouth to respond, but Agnes held up a hand. I've been listening to your excuses for 3 years, Linda. I've been the good mother, the patient grandmother, the woman who always forgives and forgets. But I'm done with that now. I'm done being invisible. I'm done being the person you take for granted. I'm going to France, and no one is going to stop me. Linda stared at her, something shifting in her expression. It might have been recognition or guilt, or just surprise at seeing her mother as a real person with real desires. Whatever it was, it softened her voice when she spoke again. Mom, I'm sorry. I really am. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't think it was that important to you. I didn't know about the trip. Agnes felt a flicker of something. Not forgiveness exactly, but a willingness to listen. Now you do. And now you can make it right. Linda nodded slowly. I'll talk to Paul. I'll see if we can return the handbag, get some of the money back. I can't promise everything, but I'll try. Agnes nodded. That's all I'm asking. But when Linda left, Agnes did not feel the sense of victory she had expected. She knew her daughter. She knew that Linda would make promises, maybe even take a few small steps toward making amends. But the underlying pattern would not change. Linda would still see her mother as a resource to be managed, a problem to be solved. And that was something Agnes could not accept. She walked to the pantry and opened the floorboard, just to remind herself of what she had lost. The space was still empty, but Agnes was no longer the woman who would weep over an empty envelope. She was the woman who would fill it again, dollar by dollar, dream by dream. She had her lawyer. She had her courage. And she had the memory of Dolores's face when she realized the handbag was bought with stolen money. That memory, Agnes decided, was worth something. It was the fuel she needed to keep fighting. That night, she sat down and wrote a long letter to Harold. She told him about the party, about the confrontation, about the lawyer. She told him about Linda's visit and the small, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. She wrote until her hand ached. And then she folded the letter and tucked it into the floorboard, beside the empty space where the envelope used to be. I'm coming, Harold, she whispered. I don't know when, but I'm coming. And as she drifted off to sleep, she dreamed of lavender fields and cobblestone streets, of croissants and café au lait, of a life that was hers alone, a life that no one could take away from her, no matter how hard they tried. 2 weeks passed in a strange limbo. Linda had indeed spoken to Paul, and Paul had indeed returned the designer handbag to the boutique. But the boutique had charged a restocking fee of 20%, and the spa package was non-refundable. The total return to Agnes was just under $3,000. The rest, Paul explained in a carefully worded email, would be paid back in monthly installments of $200 over the next 6 months. Agnes read the email 3 times, her fingers tapping a slow rhythm on the kitchen table. $200 a month. 6 months. It was a payment plan, exactly what she had refused to accept at the party. But Linda and Paul had framed it as a compromise, a gesture of goodwill. We're trying to make this right, Mom, Linda had said on the phone, her voice dripping with false sincerity. We can't do more than that right now. You have to understand. Understand. Agnes was so tired of understanding that she called Miriam, the lawyer, and explained the situation. Miriam listened without interruption, then let out a dry laugh. They're trying to placate you without actually admitting fault. It's a common tactic. They're hoping you'll accept the partial payment and drop the lawsuit. Do you want to do that? Agnes thought about it. The $3,000 was a significant amount, enough to cover the basics of her trip if she was careful. But it was not the full amount. It was not the principle of the thing. And more than that, it was not the acknowledgement she deserved. Linda and Paul were still acting as though they had done nothing wrong, as though Agnes was the unreasonable one for demanding what was rightfully hers. No, she said finally. I don't want to drop the lawsuit. I want every cent back, and I want them to admit what they did. Miriam's voice was approving. Good. I'll file the paperwork tomorrow, and I'll let them know that we're not accepting the partial payment as a settlement. We'll see how they respond. They responded quickly and predictably. The next morning, Agnes received a furious phone call from Linda. Her daughter's voice was shrill, the composure she had maintained during the visit completely gone. You're actually going through with this. You're suing your own daughter, Mom. What is wrong with you? I offered you a reasonable solution, and you're throwing it back in my face. I'm not throwing anything in your face, Agnes said calmly. I'm asking for what's mine. And I'm asking for you to take responsibility for what you did. That's not unreasonable. Unreasonable? You're the one who's being unreasonable. Do you have any idea what this is doing to my family? Paul is furious. Dolores is telling everyone I'm a thief. The kids are asking questions. You're tearing this family apart. Agnes felt a cold stillness settle over her. I'm tearing the family apart, Linda. You took my money. You spent it on gifts for a woman who doesn't need anything. You made excuses instead of apologizing. You're the one who tore the family apart. I'm just holding up a mirror. Linda was crying now, her voice ragged with emotion. You don't understand, Mom. You've never understood. You were always so perfect, so self-righteous. Everything was always about what you wanted. You never thought about what I needed. Agnes closed her eyes. She had heard this before, the familiar refrain of blame and accusation. It was always someone else's fault. Linda was always the victim, always the one who had been wronged. Agnes was tired of being cast as the villain in her own story. I'm done with this conversation, Agnes said quietly. I have nothing more to say to you until I get my money back and a genuine apology. Goodbye, Linda. She hung up before Linda could respond. Her hands were trembling, but not from fear. It was anger, pure and clean, the kind of anger that burned away the cobwebs of doubt and self-recrimination. She had spent her entire life making excuses for her children, making herself small to accommodate their needs. She was done with that. The lawsuit moved forward slowly but steadily. Miriam filed the complaint, and Linda and Paul were served with papers. They responded by hiring their own lawyer, a fast-talking man named Gerald who specialized in family disputes. Gerald reached out to Miriam with a settlement offer. $3,500 paid in full, in exchange for dropping the suit that Agnes considered the offer. It was more than she had expected, but it still wasn't everything. The lawyer's fees would eat into a significant portion of it, and the principle of the thing still rankled. Tell them no, she told Miriam. I want the full amount, $4,200 plus legal fees. And I want a written apology from Linda and Paul, acknowledging that they took my money without permission. Miriam raised an eyebrow. That's a tall order, Mrs. Calloway. Are you sure you want to push that hard? They might decide to fight it in court. Let them fight, Agnes said. I've been fighting my whole life. I'm not afraid. The negotiation dragged on for another week. Gerald made a counteroffer, then another. Miriam held firm, echoing Agnes's demands with a steely resolve that Agnes found deeply satisfying. Finally, on a gray Wednesday afternoon, Miriam called with the news. They've accepted your terms, Miriam said. And Agnes could hear the smile in her voice. Full amount plus legal fees plus a written apology. It'll be delivered to your house by courier tomorrow morning. Agnes felt a wave of emotion wash over her. Relief, yes, but also something else. Something that felt like vindication. She had fought, and she had won, but when the courier arrived the next morning, the envelope he handed her was not the triumphant victory she had imagined. It contained a cashier's check for $4,200, made out to Agnes Calloway, and a single sheet of paper, typed, with Linda's signature at the bottom. I, Linda Calloway Hughes, acknowledge that I took an envelope containing $4,200 from my mother's home without her knowledge or permission. I understand that this money was her personal savings, and I had no right to take it or to authorize its use by my husband, Paul Hughes. I apologize for my actions and for any distress they caused. I will not repeat this behavior. Agnes read the letter 3 times, searching for any hint of sincerity. She found none. The words were clinical, the language clearly crafted by Gerald, the lawyer. It was an apology, but it was not sorry. It was a surrender, but it was not an admission of fault. She folded the letter and placed it on her desk, next to the photograph of Harold. She had won the battle. But the war, she realized, was far from over. The money was back. That was what mattered. She could book her flight, plan her itinerary, make the trip to France a reality. But as she looked at the letter, she felt an emptiness in her chest. This was not the reconciliation she had hoped for. This was a business transaction, a grudging compliance with the law. Linda had not learned anything. She had not changed. Agnes made her reservations that afternoon. She booked a flight to Paris, a hotel near the Seine, a train ticket to the south of France. She called Margaret and told her the news, and her friend's joyful squeal made Agnes smile for the first time in weeks. But the smile faded when she thought about Linda. Her daughter had not spoken to her since the settlement. She had not called, not texted, not made any effort to mend the rift. The family was fractured, and Agnes knew that Linda would never forgive her for what she had done. It was a heavy burden to carry, the weight of a broken relationship. But Agnes had learned something important in the weeks since the party. She had learned that she could not fix her daughter. She could not make Linda see the truth. She could only control herself, her actions, her own future. As she packed her suitcase with care. She chose clothes that were practical but not frumpy, comfortable but not shabby. She bought a new pair of walking shoes and a small travel purse that she could wear crossbody. She studied French phrases from a book she had borrowed from the library, practicing the pronunciation in the mirror, until she felt confident enough to order coffee without embarrassment. On the morning of her departure, she woke early and went to the pantry one last time. She knelt down, lifted the loose floorboard, and placed the check from Miriam's office inside the empty space. It was the final act of her old life, the closing of a chapter she had never wanted to write. "This is for you, Harold," she whispered. "I'm going to see all those places we dreamed about. And I'm going to drink a glass of wine in your honor. I know you'd be proud of me." She closed the floorboard, stood up, and walked out of the house with her suitcase in hand. The taxi was waiting at the curb, the driver a young man with a friendly smile. He helped her with her luggage, and as they pulled away from Maple Street, Agnes did not look back. The airport was busy, bustling with travelers from all over the world. Agnes navigated the crowds with a sense of exhilaration she had not felt in years. She was not invisible here. She was just another traveler, another person with a destination and a dream. As she found her gate, sat down in a plastic chair, and watched the planes take off and land. She thought about Harold, about all the years they had spent dreaming of this moment. She thought about Linda, about the rift that seemed impossible to mend. She thought about herself, about the woman she had become in the weeks since she had lost her savings. That woman was not the same person who had hidden money under a floorboard. That woman had been afraid, cautious, willing to accept crumbs. The woman sitting in the airport was different. She was braver. She was stronger. She was someone who had stood up for herself and won. The boarding call came, and Agnes rose to her feet. She walked down the jetway with her head held high, her heart pounding with anticipation. She found her seat by the window, fastened her seatbelt, and watched the ground fall away beneath her. France. She was going to France. After 50 years of dreaming, she was finally doing it. The plane rose through the clouds, and Agnes closed her eyes. She thought about the lavender fields, the cobblestone streets, the smell of fresh croissants. She thought about Harold, about the life they had built together, and the dreams they had shared. She thought about Linda, and for a moment, she felt a pang of sadness, but she pushed it away. She had done what she could. She had fought for what was hers. She had demanded accountability and received it. The rest was up to Linda. The flight attendant came by with a tray of drinks, and Agnes ordered a glass of champagne. She raised it to the window, to the sky, to the future that awaited her. "To new beginnings," she murmured. And she drank, letting the bubbles fizz on her tongue, letting the taste of victory settle deep in her bones. The next time she opened her eyes, they were over the ocean. The blue stretched out beneath her, endless and vast, and Agnes felt a sense of freedom she had not experienced in decades. She was no longer the woman in the beige cardigan, the one who made herself small to fit into other people's lives. She was Agnes Calloway, adventurer, dreamer, survivor. And she was just getting started. Chapter 5. The lavender fields, the train from Paris to the south of France, was everything Agnes had imagined and more. The countryside unfolded outside her window in a panorama of golden light and rolling hills, dotted with villages that looked like they belonged in a painting. She pressed her face to the glass, drinking in every detail, every shade of green and gold and blue. She had spent 2 glorious weeks in Paris, walking along the Seine, visiting museums, sitting in cafes and watching the world go by. She had eaten croissants that melted on her tongue and drunk coffee that tasted like liquid velvet. She had stood at the top of the Eiffel Tower and felt the wind on her face, and she had cried, just a little, because Harold had never made it to see this. But the south of France was different. It was slower, more intimate, the kind of place that invited you to stay a while. Agnes had booked a room in a small bed and breakfast in a village called St. Paul, a place Margaret had raved about. The inn was run by a woman named Colette, a widow with a warm smile and a deep appreciation for American guests. "Welcome, Madame Calloway," Colette said, taking Agnes's suitcase. "I have prepared a room with a view of the lavender fields. You will love it. The room was small but charming, with a window that opened onto a sea of purple. Agnes stood at the window for a long time just looking. The lavender stretched as far as she could see, a carpet of color that seemed to go on forever. The air was sweet with the scent of it, and Agnes breathed it in, feeling her shoulders relax for the first time in months. She spent her days exploring the village. She walked the narrow cobblestone streets, stopping to chat with the shopkeepers and the farmers. She bought fresh bread from the bakery and cheese from the fromagerie, and she sat in the town square, eating her lunch and watching the world go by. The villagers were kind to her, treating her not as an old woman but as a guest, someone to be welcomed and cherished. One afternoon, she met a man named Jean-Pierre, a retired professor who walked his dog through the lavender fields every evening. He was tall and silver-haired, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He stopped to chat with Agnes one evening, asking where she was from and how she had found their little village. "It's a long story," Agnes said, and she surprised herself by telling him everything. About Harold, about the trip they had planned, about the money that had been taken and the fight to get it back. Jean-Pierre listened without interrupting, his dog sitting patiently at his feet. "You are a strong woman," he said when she finished. "It takes courage to do what you did, to stand up for yourself, to come here alone." Agnes smiled. "I didn't feel strong. I just felt angry." "Anger is the beginning of courage," Jean-Pierre said. "It is the fire that burns away the fear. You are braver than you know." They walked together through the lavender fields, the sun setting behind them in a blaze of orange and gold. Jean-Pierre told her about his own life, about his wife who had passed 5 years ago, about the children who had grown up and moved away. He understood loss. He understood loneliness. And he understood, Agnes realized, what it meant to start over. The next evening, they walked together again. And the evening after that, Agnes found herself looking forward to their meetings, to the easy conversation and the comfortable silence. Jean-Pierre was not Harold, and she was not looking for a replacement. But she was looking for connection, for the simple joy of being seen and heard. One night, as they sat on a bench overlooking the fields, Jean-Pierre reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it to reveal a delicate necklace, a silver chain with a tiny lavender flower pendant. "This is for you," he said, his voice soft. "To remind you of this place, of this time, of the woman who had the courage to follow her dream." Agnes felt tears prick at her eyes. She had not expected this. She had not expected kindness, not really. She had spent so long being taken for granted that she had forgotten what it felt like to be cherished. "Jean-Pierre, I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," he said with a gentle smile. "Say you will stay a little longer. Say you will let me show you more of this beautiful country." Agnes looked down at the necklace, at the delicate silver flower. She thought about Linda, about the angry texts and the silence that followed. She thought about Robert, about his well-meaning but useless attempts to play peacemaker. She thought about the house on Maple Street, the house that had once been a sanctuary and had become a prison. She thought about the woman she had been a month ago, the woman who hid her savings under a floorboard and made herself invisible. And she thought about the woman she was now, the one who had flown across an ocean and walked through lavender fields with a kind stranger. "Yes," she said, and the word felt like a key turning in a lock. "Yes, I will stay a little longer." Jean-Pierre put the necklace around her neck, his fingers brushing her skin. Agnes felt a warmth spread through her, not romantic, exactly, but something deeper. It was the warmth of being valued, of being seen. It was the warmth of a new beginning. That night, she called Margaret to tell her the news. Her friend laughed with delight. "Aggie, you are a new woman. I always knew you had it in you." "Thank you for pushing me," Agnes said. "Thank you for telling me about this place. It's changed everything." "Don't thank me," Margaret said. "You did this yourself. You fought for it. You earned it. You deserve every bit of happiness that comes your way." Agnes hung up the phone and looked out the window at the lavender fields, dark now under the moonlight. She thought about Harold, and for the first time she didn't feel sad. She felt grateful. He had given her the love that had sustained her for so many years. And he had given her the push to keep going, even when she didn't know how. She thought about Linda, about the angry words and the broken relationship. She had done what she could. She had fought for what was hers. The rest was not up to her. The rest was up to Linda, and Agnes could not carry the weight of that burden anymore. She walked to the small desk in her room and pulled out a piece of stationery. She wrote a letter to Linda, the first she had written in years. Dear Linda, I am writing to you from a small village in the south of France. It is beautiful here, more beautiful than I ever imagined. The lavender fields stretch for miles, and the people are kind and welcoming. I wish you could see it. I wish you could understand why it mattered so much to me. I know you are angry. I know you think I was unreasonable. But I need you to know that I didn't do this to hurt you. I did this to save myself. I spent so many years making myself small, giving and giving until there was nothing left. I couldn't do that anymore. I had to fight for something of my own. I love you, Linda. I have always loved you. And I will always be your mother. But I can't be the woman you want me to be. I can't keep pretending that everything is fine when it's not. I hope one day you can understand that. I'm staying here for another month. Jean-Pierre, a friend I've made here, has offered to show me more of the country. I'm going to see the vineyards, the castles, the coastline. I'm going to live every moment of this dream that I waited so long to pursue. When I come home, I hope we can talk. Really talk. Not about the money, but about us. About the family we used to be and the family we might become. With all my love, Mom. She folded the letter and tucked it into an envelope. She would mail it tomorrow, from the little post office in the village square. It was not a reconciliation. It was not even a peace offering. It was simply an opening, a door left ajar. Whether Linda chose to walk through it was up to her. Agnes put the letter on the nightstand and climbed into bed. The window was open, and the scent of lavender drifted in on the night breeze. She closed her eyes and let herself sink into the soft mattress. Her body tired but her heart full as she thought about the journey that had brought her here. The anger, the hurt, the fight. It had been hard, harder than anything she had done in decades. But it had been worth it. Every tear, every sleepless night, every angry word. They had led her here, to this moment, to this bed in a village in the south of France. She touched the necklace at her throat, the silver lavender flower. Jean-Pierre was a good man, and she was grateful for his kindness. But she was not looking for a new love. She was looking for a new life. And she had found it. Tomorrow, she would walk through the lavender fields with Jean-Pierre. She would eat fresh bread and drink good wine. She would see the sun set over the hills and feel the wind on her face. And she would be happy. Not because of anyone else, but because of herself. Because she had finally, after all these years, chosen herself. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from Margaret. How's the Frenchman? Any romance brewing? Agnes laughed softly and typed a reply. Just friendship. And it's perfect. She put the phone down and closed her eyes. The scent of lavender wrapped around her like a blanket, and she felt a deep, profound peace settle over her. She had dreamed of this moment for so long. And now that it was here, it was better than she had ever imagined. France. She was in France. And she had earned every moment of it. She fell asleep with a smile on her face, dreaming of lavender fields and new beginnings, of the woman she had become and the future that awaited her. It was a future she had fought for, and it was a future she would not trade for anything in the world. The letter to Linda was mailed the next morning, and Agnes felt a lightness in her chest as she watched the postman take it away. She had said what she needed to say. She had left the door open. Now it was Linda's turn to decide whether she wanted to walk through it. The days in St. Paul fell into a gentle rhythm. Agnes and Jean-Pierre walked through the lavender fields every evening, their conversations ranging from the trivial to the profound. He told her about his years as a professor, about the students who had inspired him and the ones who had tried his patience. She told him about Harold, about the life they had built and the dreams they had shared. There was no pressure between them, no expectation. Just two people who had been lonely and had found, in each other, a reason to smile. One evening, as they sat on their usual bench overlooking the fields, Jean-Pierre turned to her with a thoughtful expression. Agnes, I have been thinking. There is a vineyard not far from here. The owner is a friend of mine. He makes a wine that I think you would enjoy. Would you like to visit him tomorrow? Agnes smiled. I would love to. The vineyard was nestled in a valley, surrounded by rolling hills and rows of grapevines that stretched toward the horizon. The owner, a robust man named Marcel, greeted Jean-Pierre with a warm embrace and Agnes with a kiss on both cheeks. He led them through the vineyard, explaining the process of winemaking with the enthusiasm of a man who loved his work. At the end of the tour, Marcel opened a bottle of his finest vintage and poured 3 glasses. They sat at a wooden table overlooking the vines, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. "This is for Harold," Agnes said, raising her glass. "For all the years we dreamed of this moment." Jean-Pierre and Marcel raised their glasses in silence, honoring the gesture. Agnes took a sip, and the wine was everything she had imagined and more. It was rich and smooth, with a hint of something floral that reminded her of the lavender fields. "This is the best wine I have ever tasted," she said, and Marcel beamed. "Then you must take a bottle with you," he said. A gift from one dreamer to another. As they walked back to the village, the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky, Jean-Pierre reached for Agnes's hand. She let him take it, feeling the warmth of his fingers intertwined with hers. It was not a passionate gesture. It was something simpler, something more profound. It was companionship. It was trust. "Agnes," Jean-Pierre said, his voice soft, "I have been alone for 5 years. I thought I would always be alone. But then you came. And I realized that I had been waiting for someone like you. Not to replace my wife, but to remind me that there is still joy in the world." Agnes felt her heart swell. "Jean-Pierre, I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I'm ready for anything more than friendship. But I know that these weeks with you have been the happiest I have felt in years." "That is enough," he said. "That is more than enough." They walked in comfortable silence, the village lights twinkling ahead of them. Agnes thought about the life she had left behind, the house on Maple Street, the children who had taken her for granted, the dream she had almost lost. She had fought so hard to get here and she had won. But the victory was not just about the money. It was about the realization that she was worth fighting for. That night, as she lay in bed, her phone buzzed with a text message. She picked it up, expecting it to be Margaret or Jean-Pierre. But the name on the screen made her breath catch. It was Linda. "Mom, I got your letter. I've been thinking a lot about what you said. I don't know if I can be the daughter you want me to be, but I want to try. I want to understand. Can we talk?" Agnes stared at the screen, her eyes welling with tears. She had not expected this. She had hoped, of course, but she had been prepared for silence, for more anger, for the same old patterns to repeat themselves. But Linda was reaching out. Linda was trying. She typed a reply, her fingers trembling. "Of course, sweetheart. I would like that very much. Call me tomorrow. I'll be here." She put the phone down and let the tears flow. They were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of hope, of the fragile possibility that something could be mended. She had not realized how much she had been carrying until that moment. The weight of a broken relationship that she had been too afraid to acknowledge. The next morning, Linda called. Her voice was hesitant. The voice of a woman who was not sure of her welcome. "Mom. It's me." "Linda," Agnes said, and her voice was steady. "Thank you for calling. I read your letter. Every word. I know I haven't been a good daughter. I know I took you for granted. I thought I was helping you, but I was just making everything about me. I'm sorry, Mom." "I'm really sorry." Agnes listened, her heart swelling with a mixture of emotions. This was not the perfect apology. It was not the grand reconciliation she had dreamed of, but it was real. It was a start. "I forgive you, Linda," Agnes said. "I forgave you the moment I saw your name on the screen. But forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. We have a lot of work to do, you and I. And I'm not going to be the same woman I was before. I can't be." "I know," Linda said. "I don't want you to be. I want you to be happy. I want you to be yourself." Agnes smiled. "I am happy, Linda. I'm happier than I've been in years. And I hope someday you can be happy too." They talked for an hour, the longest conversation they had had in years. They talked about the past, about the hurts and the misunderstandings. They talked about the future, about the possibility of rebuilding their relationship. And when they hung up, Agnes felt a sense of peace settle over her. The road ahead would not be easy, but it was a road she was willing to walk. That evening, she walked with Jean-Pierre through the lavender fields one last time. Tomorrow she would return to the United States. Tomorrow she would face the life she had left behind. But tonight she was here in this moment surrounded by beauty and kindness. "You are different than when you arrived," Jean-Pierre observed. "You are softer but also stronger. The lavender has done its work." Agnes laughed. "Or maybe it was the wine." Jean-Pierre smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Perhaps. But I think it was you. You were always strong, Agnes. You just had to remember it." They reached the bench where they had spent so many evenings. Agnes sat down, and Jean-Pierre sat beside her. The sun was setting, painting the fields in shades of purple and gold. It was the most beautiful sight Agnes had ever seen, and she wanted to hold on to it forever. "Thank you, Jean-Pierre," she said. "For everything. For showing me this place. For reminding me that I am still capable of joy." "Thank you for coming," he said. "For reminding me that life does not end when love is lost. It continues. It grows. It becomes something new." Agnes reached into her purse and pulled out the photograph of Harold, the one that had been pinned to her corkboard for so many years. She looked at it, at the face of the man she had loved for so long, and she felt no sadness, only gratitude. "I'm going to leave this here," she said, placing the photograph on the bench. "I don't need it anymore. I have the memories. And I have the future." Jean-Pierre watched her with a gentle expression. "You are letting go," he said. "I am," Agnes agreed. "I'm letting go of the past. I'm letting go of the anger. I'm letting go of the fear. I'm going to live the rest of my life the way I want to live it. And I'm not going to apologize for it." She stood up and walked to the edge of the lavender field. She reached down and picked a single stalk, the tiny purple flowers soft against her fingers. She tucked it into the buttonhole of her blouse, a token of this place, this time, this moment. "I'm ready to go home," she said. "Not to the old home. To a new one. A home I'm going to build for myself." Jean-Pierre walked her back to the village. At the door of the bed and breakfast, he took her hands in his. "You will come back?" he asked. "To see the lavender?" Agnes smiled. "I will. I promise." She kissed him on the cheek, a gesture of friendship and gratitude. Then she walked into the inn, her heart full, her mind clear. She was ready for whatever came next. The next morning, she boarded the train to Paris. As the lavender fields disappeared from view, she felt a pang of loss, but it was a gentle pang, the kind that came with knowing you had experienced something beautiful. She would return. She would see Jean-Pierre again. But she would also build a new life, one that was entirely her own. When she arrived back in the United States, she did not go to the house on Maple Street. Not right away. Instead, she went to the small apartment she had rented in the city, a place with big windows and a view of the skyline. It was not the home she had shared with Harold. It was not the home her children had grown up in. But it was hers as she unpacked her suitcase and hung her clothes in the closet. She put the lavender stalk in a small vase on the windowsill. She took out the photograph of Harold from her purse, the one she had taken back from the bench before she left, and placed it on the nightstand. It was not a shrine. It was a reminder of where she had been and how far she had come. That evening her phone buzzed. It was Linda. "Mom, I know you're back. The kids are asking to see you. Can we come over this weekend? I'll bring dinner." Agnes smiled. "I would love that, sweetheart. I'll see you then." She sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker to life. She thought about the lavender fields, about Jean-Pierre, about the life she had found in the south of France. She thought about Linda, about the fragile hope of a new beginning. She thought about Harold, about the love that had sustained her for so many years. And she thought about herself, the woman who had hidden her savings under a floorboard, the woman who had stood up to her daughter in front of a room full of strangers, the woman who had flown across an ocean and found herself in a field of purple flowers. She was not the same person who had left. She was stronger. She was braver. She was freed as she touched the lavender stalk on her windowsill. It was dried now, but the color was still there, a soft purple that reminded her of the fields. She picked it up and held it to her nose, breathing in the faint, sweet scent. "I'm home," she whispered. "And I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Outside, the city hummed with life, a world of possibilities stretching out before her. Agnes Calloway had come a long way from the pantry on Maple Street. She had traveled across the world and found herself along the way. And she knew, with a certainty that burned bright in her chest, that the best was yet to come.